Good morning or afternoon, everyone. I'm Natalia Abrams. Thank you for joining our Getting Out of Delinquency and Default. We have a lot to cover today, so we're going to jump right into it. Just a quick about us. Myself, Natalia, and you'll hear later from my colleague Sabrina Calazans. We are Student Debt Crisis Center. We're a national advocacy organization with 2 million supporters, calling for fundamental reforms to student loan policies and an end to the student debt crisis once and for all. And we're lucky today to have a special guest. We have Kira Taylor, who is a staff attorney with the National Consumer Law Center. They use the tools of advocacy, education, and litigation to fight for economic justice for low income and other vulnerable people who have been abused, deceived, discriminated against, or left behind in our economy. At NCLC, National Consumer Law Center, they fight every day to level the economic playing field for consumers, focusing on the needs of the most vulnerable people, families, and communities. And we're really honored to have Kira join us today to go over default and delinquency. So some quick reminders, if you haven't joined our workshops before, please use the Q&A functions to ask your questions, not the chat. I will say too, there's a feature if you'd like to ask your question anonymously. We know some folks don't want to be identified. That is an option for your default and delinquency or any student debt questions that pertain to this workshop. Any of the information shared on today's clinic pertains to the current guidelines and rules. So today is February 18th, 2026. Things are changing really fast in the student loan landscape. So we just want folks to know if you're viewing this recording a couple weeks from now to always check on the most recent news. In addition, there will be a recording provided for anyone that's attending this workshop. So if certain portions go too fast, you'll get the recording within about 24 hours so you can view this at your leisure. And finally, at Student Debt Crisis Center, we are not financial counselors or attorneys. I will say NCLC is a group of wonderful attorneys, but we are all advocates and experts here to help you. So today, what are we going to cover? What is delinquency and what is default and delinquency? If you are in default, how do I get out? How can you lower your monthly payments? And other pathways to loan forgiveness. And as always, we'll have resources and time to cover any questions and hopefully provide you answers on this workshop. So let's get started with some federal updates. So on default, last month, if you haven't heard the news already, the Department of Education announced that it has temporarily paused involuntary collections on defaulted student loan debt. So this is a place where the news has been going back and forth. If you remember or you've been paying attention to the default news, we did get news at the end of last year that they were going to turn on involuntary collections. This was paused. This includes wage garnishment, tax refund seizures, and more. You should not be having your wage garnished or your taxes taken, your tax refund taken if you are in student loan default. This is a result of public pressure. So we thank you for signing any petitions, making your voice heard. And this helps the about 9 million people that are either in default or in the process of defaulting on their student loans. I will say the only issue with this is it's temporary. We don't know when it's going to end. So again, pay attention to the news, follow Student Debt Crisis Center and NCLC to keep the most up to date with what's going on with default. Now we'll move on to student loan types. We just want to make sure to cover this so you know which type of loan you may have. We'll also show you how you can find that out if you don't know already. But with student loans, there are federal and private loans. Today, we are going to be covering federal student loans and delinquency and default as it pertains to federal student loans. So this is broken up into direct loans, Perkins loans, and FFELP or Federal Family Education Loan Program loans. The direct loans are, there's many. You can get a subsidized or unsubsidized. You can get a direct graduate plus loan as of now that will not be issued after July 1st of this year, a direct parent plus loan, and a direct consolidation loan. Perkins loans are loans that were granted by the school. Those can always be consolidated into the direct loan program. And then the FFELP loans, these are loans that were issued prior to 2010. I remember I had them. You'll see things like subsidized but unsubsidized Stafford, FFELP plus, FFELP consolidation, and Parent Plus loans. And so another quick reminder is the repayment timeline of what's been going on since the COVID payment pause. So from 2020 to 2026, in the last 6 years, my goodness. So almost almost 6 years ago, on March 13th, there was a federal payment pause. So no payments were required. And for the majority of federal loan borrowers, interest was not accruing. That ended in September, at the end of September in 2023. Then at that point, there was another year from October 1st of 2023 to the end of September 2024, where there was an on-ramp. This meant that there was no risk of being in default. And we'll get into this, Kira will get into this more, defaults after 9 months of not paying, but that this didn't happen during the period of 23 to end of September of 24. Interest did start to accrue, but it was another kind of extension of that payment pause for borrowers to give you more time to start repaying. However, as of October 1st, 2024, there was no protections for missed payments. So that meant that we started to see a lot of people about it a little over a year ago, under a year ago, start to default. And now more than 9 million people are in the process of defaulting. And with that, I'm going to give it over to Kira Taylor, who's going to thoroughly go over delinquency and default. Kira?
Thanks, Natalia. I am so happy to be on the call with all of you today. And I'm so grateful that you're here because I know for a lot of folks, student loan payments feel overwhelming, insurmountable, and so difficult to navigate. You get into the details and it can be incredibly difficult. And so today, hopefully, we're going to be able to decode aspects of the student loan system so that you have a clear idea of what your rights are and what your options are. I wanted to flag at the top, even though I'm an attorney, I cannot provide legal advice on this call, but I can provide you with education and I can direct you. And I know Sabrina and Natalia have fabulous resources to share with you during this call as well. So with that, let's go on to the next slide and talk about how do you default on your federal student loans. So what happens when you don't make payments or you don't make a full payment on your federal student loans? After 1 day of missed payments, your loans become delinquent. And after 90 days of delinquency, those missed payments will be reported on your credit report. So your credit report will start getting dinged. After 270 days of non-payment, your federal student loan goes into default. But you might be able to call your loan servicer at that point, and get the default reversed. However, at 360 days, typically your loan is moved from your non-default servicer to a default servicer. And at that point, you have more limited options to get your loans out of default. Now, when your loans are delinquent, they will remain delinquent until you make up missed payments, until you call your servicer and ask for a forbearance to be applied to bring your account current, or a deferment as well. Or if you apply for an IDR plan, the servicer will automatically apply a forbearance to bring your account current, and then you'll just pay in your income-driven repayment plan. Now, one reason why it's really important that we're talking about default today is the consequences of default are really severe. So, unlike other forms of credit, when you default on a federal student loan, the government can collect on that loan forever. There is no limitation around how long the government can collect on that loan. And not just that, the government can take your tax refund to pay off your defaulted loan. They can garnish a portion of your wages. And they can also take a portion of some federal benefits like your Social Security. Now, that sounds really scary, I know, but you have options, both if you're delinquent now to get your loans current, and also even if you're in default today, to get your loans out of default. One important caveat here is that on direct loans and FFEL loans, it's 270 days of missed payments before you default. If you have a Perkins loan, like Natalia was talking about before, which is dispersed by your school, a Perkins loan can be placed in default after just 1 day of missed payment. Next slide, please. Now, as if the collection powers weren't scary enough, there are other consequences to defaulting on federal student loans. So, first, the entire loan amount becomes due in full. It accelerates the loan. In addition, you can be charged with collection and legal fees, which can be a large addition to your outstanding balance. The default can be reported on your credit report for up to 7 years. Like we talked about before, the government can garnish your wages, take your tax refund, offset other federal benefits to pay off your defaulted student loan debt. And then the government can also sue you to collect the debt if you default on your student debt. I'll note that this is much less common. It's much easier for the Department of Education to garnish your wages, take your tax refund, etc. But in some cases, borrowers, certainly in the past, borrowers have been sued to collect on their debt. If you're in default on your student loan debt, that can prevent you from going back to school and taking out additional federal student aid. And it can make you ineligible for other forms of federal credit, like federally backed mortgages as well. Um, in addition, depending on the loan type you have, your debt can be sent to collection agencies, and the collection agencies are going to try to find you and get you to pay your debt. So in the past, borrowers have reported being harassed by their collection agencies. In addition, if you work for law enforcement or the military, having a loan in default can impact your security clearance. And if you're applying for jobs, it can also show up on background checks and certainly your credit report, etc. So the implications of defaulting on your student loans is significant. It appears on your credit. It can impact your ability to get a mortgage, get a lease, get a car loan. And like I said before, the government's collection powers can continue indefinitely until the debt is paid off or until you you put your loans back in good standing. Next slide, please. So all of that was really scary. But like Natalia said before, there is a little bit of silver lining because the government has paused or delayed its collection powers. So right now, no one should be experiencing wage garnishment or tax refund seizure. The government likely will not be seizing refunds during this tax season. However, this is a temporary pause, so we don't know how long this delay is going to last. So now is a really, really good time to figure out what your loan status is, and if you are in default or if you are delinquent, to get your loans back into good standing. Next slide. So, just to dwell and give you all the information you need to know about the government's collection powers, I want to talk about the consequences of not bringing your loans back into good standing. Because the most common negative impact, in addition to negative credit reporting, and being ineligible for federal student aid and other forms of federally backed credit, are the government's collection powers. So let's talk about this a little bit more. The government can use wage garnishment, which would mean the department would work with your employer to garnish up to 15% of your paycheck. The Department of Education will send a notice to your employer saying that up to 15% of your paycheck should be carved off the top and sent to them directly instead of going to you. So that is pretty significant. In addition, There is the Treasury Offset Program, which is another collection of administrative powers that the Department of Education can use to collect money from you to pay off defaulted loans. So the government, in seizing your tax refund, can also take important benefits like your earned income tax credit if you're very low income, your child tax credit, and other federal or state payments as a means of a collection on your defaulted student loans. Um, in addition, the Department of Education can seize a portion of your Social Security check if you're receiving Social Security. Um, However, the two most common powers that folks experience are tax refund offset and wage garnishment. So this just sort of, you should know what can happen if you stay in default. But again, like we talked about before, now's a really good time to take steps to get your loans back into good standing. So the other piece is there are a number of different opportunities you will have to take steps to prevent collection. So when you first go into default, the government will send you a notice saying you're in default and you need to take steps to take your loans out of default or you'll be subject to the government's collection powers. And it also gives you an opportunity to object to the default if you think that they've made a mistake and your loans aren't actually in default, or you are eligible for a statutory discharge program or cancellation program, which we're going to talk about at the end. In addition, depending on the collection power the government is using, it may also send you a notice saying, hey, if you don't take steps, we are going to garnish your wages or we're going to seize a portion of your Social Security check. These notices are also important times to act. Now, again, like Natalia said before, we are currently in a pause. So the government is not using its collection powers right now, but right now is a really good time to get your loans back into good standing. I will also flag, we know that there's a large portion of people that are newly defaulting now. So they're in that 270 to 360 day window. And there's a really important opportunity that happens if you catch your loans before they're transferred to the default servicer. So if you have defaulted loans that have not been transferred to a default loan servicer, this is your best time to act quickly because you can call your loan servicer and request to be put into an IDR plan or ask for a retroactive forbearance to bring your loans out of default and back into good standing. This is a really important opportunity, and you will lose that ability once your loans are transferred to the default servicer. And again, that typically happens between 270 and 360 days after non or insufficient payment. If we could, yeah. So the next thing you might be asking yourself is, Kira, wow, those consequences are really severe. So how do I figure out what my loan status is? How do I figure out if I'm delinquent or I'm in default? So let's talk about that. So you have two very important accounts. One account you have is with your loan servicer, where you're logging in, you're probably making payments. But there's another critical place that you need to log in. You have an account on studentaid.gov. That's where the government allows you to log in so that you can check the loans that you've taken out, what status your loans are in, and which student loan servicers you have. And you can also check your loan types. So there's a ton of information there. I will tell you that I've worked with folks who enrolled into school at different times, did undergrad and grad school, or had different types of loans, and found that they had multiple loan servicers, even though they only borrowed federal student loan debt. So it's really important to log into studentaid.gov and check out your situation. Now, if you are like, Kira, I tried and I can't log in, that's okay. You can call the number here and you can check out this URL listed to recover your account. So if you run into problems logging in, don't let that stop you. This website, logging into your account, is a really important source of information for you to figure out what your federal loan situation is. Next slide, please. Now, if you are in default, when you log in, right on the landing page to your account, you will see a banner that says you have 3 loans in default, and you can get contact information for each of the loans in default. Depending on the type of loan you have, there may be different entities you need to reach out to about those loans. So that is really important. You want to look for that banner. I will flag we've heard reports from some borrowers that folks who were previously in default, whose loans are currently in good standing, are also seeing that banner, but that's only happening for folks who were in default previously. And frankly, if you see the banner, you need to call those numbers and verify whether or not your loans are in default. Because again, the consequences of being in default are so severe, it's worth doing your homework now to make sure that your loans are okay. The other important thing to flag here is that when you log into studentaid.gov, you can also get information about your student loan servicers. That's that smaller box. And that is also really important to check because you want to make sure that you're interacting with the right companies across all of your loans. I have talked to borrowers who were in good standing on some of their loans and didn't realize that they had a different loan servicer on other loans and fell into default on those loans. So that is another really important box to check. Next slide, please. Okay, so you log in and you see that banner and you go, oh my goodness, I'm in default. What do I do now? So you can take some additional steps to get some more information about what you need to do next. First, like we were saying before, the government's going to send you notices repeatedly to tell you that you're in default. Your servicer's going to email you to say, hey, you're in default, please do something. When your loan is transferred, the default resolution group, which is the default servicer, is going to reach out to you and say, hey, you're in default, please do something. If you don't do something, you're going to be subject to collections. So, and typically they're reaching out to you via email or mail. So when you receive these notices, please do not ignore them. There's a really important opportunity to get your loans back into good standing before you face consequences, the consequences of default that we talked about before. In addition, DRG, the default resolution group, is a good place to call if you're not sure who you need to reach out to about your loans in default, even if you're ultimately going to interact with a different company, if you have what's called a commercially held FEL loan. The FEL loans, like Natalia was talking about before, are a type of federal loan, but they were issued originally by a lender, guaranteed by a guarantee agency, and then reinsured by the federal government. Some of those original lenders still hold those loans, so you may be interacting with a different entity, even though they're still federal student loans. DRG will be able to tell you who to call depending on the types of loans you have. All direct loans, however, are held by the Department of Education, and you'll be working with DRG to figure out your options there. The other thing is, in addition to doing your homework, you also need to figure out how you want to get your loans out of default. So we'll talk about that in just a second. Okay, so you've logged into studentaid.gov. Holy guacamole, you're in trouble because you've got either loans in default or loans that are delinquent. So what are you going to do to get them back into good standing? I'm glad you asked. Let's move on and talk about some good news. So if your loans are delinquent, if you haven't hit that 270 days or 9 months of non-payment yet, it's relatively easy to bring your loans back into good standing. So your loans are going to remain delinquent until you make up your missed payments, you receive a retroactive forbearance or deferment for the delinquent period. You can apply for a statutory discharge program, which we're going to talk about at the end. So things like total and permanent disability discharges, borrower defense, closed school discharges, or your loans are enrolled in an IDR plan because the servicer will also bring the loans current then. So what should you do? Call your servicer. If you see that your loans are delinquent, they will be able to help you and they will be able to help get you into a forbearance. If you're calling and the person it doesn't seem to really understand what you're asking for, you can ask for a retroactive forbearance to bring your loans back into good standing. You can ask for that. And if they still aren't able to help you, you can ask for their supervisor and ask again. In addition, you can also tell them that you're applying for an IDR plan, statutory discharge, etc. They may ask you for some additional information about why you need a forbearance. So you can tell them, my mom got sick and I don't have the money to pay, etc. So don't be surprised if they ask you for some additional information there. Okay. Now, what if your loans are in default? You're already past that 270 days of non-payment. It's been transferred to the default servicer, DRG. So what do you do? So there are generally 4 options to get your loans back into good standing. The first is that loan has been accelerated, so now you owe all of the principal and all of the interest. If you can afford to, you can pay it all off. Um, or your other option is that you can enter into a payment plan where you make payments. However, while you're in that payment plan, your loan will still be in default. So for most folks, a payment plan is not the best option because another way to get your loans out of default is entering a loan rehabilitation agreement where you agree to make 9 reasonable and affordable payments consecutively in a row on time full payments. And at the end of that time, at the end of the 10th month, your loans will be removed from default and put back in good standing. So that is generally a better option for folks because by the time you hit sometimes when you enter a loan rehabilitation, um, excuse me, when you make 5 payments, it will change how your loans are showing up. Um, so you don't want to be in a payment plan where you're making these payments and your loans are still in default because you may be in default for a longer period of time than you would otherwise be in a rehabilitation agreement. The third option to get your loans out of default is doing loan consolidation, which is where you borrow a new loan, a consolidation loan that pays off your existing loans. And that new consolidation loan is back in good standing. And then, like we talked about before, if you're in that sweet spot between 270 and 360 days of non-payment, and your loan has not been transferred to a default servicer, you can call your servicer and ask for a retroactive forbearance. We have heard about this working for borrowers. So that is an option if you are in that sweet spot there. All right. So that's a lot of options. So where do you start? So the first thing is that you can call the default resolution group. Like we talked about before, they hold a lot of information. And even if they are not servicing your loan, they'll be able to tell you who to call about all of your loans. Um, and if you have ed held loans in default, so direct loans, some fell loans, and Perkins loans, DRG can help with next steps as well. Next slide. So let's break down the 2 most common ways that folks get out of default, which the first one we're going to talk about is loan rehabilitation, and then we're going to talk about loan consolidation next. So loan rehabilitation. Right now, if you've already successfully rehabilitated your loans, you only get one shot. That will change in the future because of the Big Bill Act. But for right now, if you've already fully rehabilitated your loans, you are not eligible for this option. However, if you've never rehabilitated your loans or you've never completed a rehabilitation agreement, this is still an option for you to remove your loans from default. So in a loan rehabilitation agreement, you have to make 9 full on-time monthly payments over the course of 10 months. Um, you're going to work with the lender to determine a reasonable and affordable monthly payment amount, and you will need to prove your income level. That's how they base your reasonable monthly payment amount, either via your tax records or you can submit alternative documentation to prove your income. Then once they receive that proof, they will send you a rehabilitation agreement that you must sign and return to them. Okay? So first you're going to call them, you're going to say, "This is my income." Then they're going to say, "Okay, send us your proof." You're going to send them your proof. Then they're going to send you the agreement. You're going to sign it. And then you're going to start making payments in the rehabilitation agreement. Um, like I said before, if you don't know who holds your loans, you can call the default resolution group to figure out who you need to talk to enter into a rehabilitation agreement. Now, if you're like, "Kira, but what do you mean in terms of reasonable monthly payment amount? I don't know if I can afford this." The general calculation is that it's equal to 15% of your income above 150% of the federal poverty line for your family size divided by 12. This is what your payment would be in the old income-based repayment IDR plan. If that isn't affordable, there's an alternate calculation where you have to provide evidence of your expenses and income to ask for a lower payment. That is typically much more difficult for many folks. The general payment, you can afford the general payment. And if you are very low income, your payment could be as little as $5 a month. So this could be a good option and a manageable option to remove your loans out of default. Next slide, please. So I want to repeat the steps because it sounds like a lot, but actually, you can successfully enter and complete a rehabilitation agreement. So, first, you're going to call the default resolution group or whoever they told you to call about your loans if you have a commercially held FFEL loan. Um, you're going to need to share your income information, so you're going to need to know that before you call. And the default servicer or the lender will calculate your estimated loan rehab payment amount. Um, so they're going to give you an estimated amount. You then have to send them proof of your income. So you're going to need to mail or fax a copy of your most recent filed tax return, so last year's tax return. You can also use, like I said before, an alternative method to establish your repayment agreement amount, but you're going to need to provide a lot of documentation to prove up all of your income and all of your expenses to explain why that default calculation isn't sufficient and isn't reasonable or affordable for you. And like I said before, for most folks, it works. Then they're going to send you, after receiving that proof, a loan rehabilitation agreement. You need to sign it and return it. Um, if there's something wrong with the monthly payment amount that you see in that agreement, then you can call them and say, hey, there was a problem, explain what the problem was, and then they'll send you a new agreement. Um, so it's important that you sign it and return it. Then after you send that signed agreement, you can start making payments. Again, you have to make 9 on-time full payments over in a row over 10 months to remove your loan out of default and put it back into good standing. Next slide, please. I jumped ahead. After the ninth payment, the Department of Education is going to send a request to a credit reporting agency to remove just the record of default from your credit report. But it may take a little bit of time for it to be reported on your credit report. Now, folks get excited about this, but the credit benefits are muted typically because the record of non-payment is still going to be on your credit report. So the fact you didn't make monthly payments will still be there. It's just the record of default that is removed from your credit report. Um, and like we talked about before, right now you can only rehabilitate a defaulted loan one time. Next slide, please. So let's recap. You're going to call DRG to say, do I work with you on my defaulted loans? Do I need to call somebody else? You're going to then, if you want to remove your loans from default via a rehabilitation agreement, you're going to call the lender and ask for a rehabilitation agreement. And you're going to provide them with your income information and they're going to give you an estimate. You're then going to send your income information to prove your income level. They're going to send you a rehabilitation agreement. You're going to sign it. You're going to send it back. And then you're going to make 9 full on-time payments as you agreed to in the agreement. And after completing, so after making those 9 on-time payments, your loans will be removed from default, and then you will need to apply to enroll in an income-driven repayment plan, which will make your loans more affordable, your payments more affordable in the future. Next slide, please. So that was one option to remove your loans out of default. Another common way that folks remove their loans from default is consolidation. So consolidation is the process of converting or combining your loans into a direct consolidation loan, which creates a new loan that pays off the defaulted federal loans. So you can consolidate just one federal loan or many federal loans into a consolidation loan. You can consolidate direct loans, FFEL loans, Perkins, Parent Plus loans. And again, you can do just one or multiple. The only exception here is that if you only owe a single direct consolidation loan, you cannot consolidate it again on its own. However, you can consolidate a consolidation loan and another loan, like a FFEL loan or a direct loan, into another consolidation loan. When you are consolidating out of default, you must also either agree to repay under an income-driven repayment plan, which is just including an income-driven repayment application, or you have to agree to make 3 full on-time payments before consolidating and enrolling the loan you have to make 3 full on-time payments before consolidating. For most folks, just attaching an IDR application with the consolidation application is the easiest way to remove your loans from default, for everybody, honestly. So that is the way to go. Um, if we can just go back real quick. Now, very important, that small text at the bottom. There's one big downside to consolidating right now, which is if you have accrued qualifying time towards cancellation in an income-driven repayment plan, right now, if you consolidate your loans, your consolidation loans qualifying time will be reset to 0. So you will lose any qualifying time towards IDR cancellation if you consolidate your loans right now. So you will have to assess what your loan history is and if you have IDR qualifying time when you're deciding what your best option is to remove your loans from default. So I know this all gets confusing. Here's a helpful graphic, which is you can consolidate just one loan, all of those different loan types, into a new direct consolidation loan. You can also take multiple loans and consolidate them into a direct consolidation loan. This is also true if you have a direct consolidation loan that you're consolidating with another loan, that can be consolidated again into a direct consolidation loan. And the next slide, the only thing you can't do is you cannot consolidate a single direct consolidation loan into another direct consolidation loan. If you only have a direct consolidation loan in default, you're going to need to explore loan rehabilitation or another option to bring your loans out of default. Next slide, please. So the other nice thing about consolidation is that it is typically much faster than loan rehabilitation because you can apply either online or via a paper application. Um, One thing to know if you're consolidating your loans out of default is that you will need to manually enter loans in default into the application. They will not appear automatically. So you will have to be prepared to write them in, which means you'll have to navigate some of your loan information on your account on studentaid.gov. Um, if you're consolidating online, the IDR application is also part of the consolidation application. If you're consolidating via paper, you can submit both the consolidation application and the IDR application all in one. Now, unlike loan rehabilitation, which takes 10 months to remove your loans out of default, with consolidation, your loans can be removed from default when that consolidation application is processed. And typically that's anywhere from 30 to 90 days. And in that intervening period, you won't have payments due. The payments will become due once your consolidation loan has been dispersed, which would mean you're back in good standing. But again, that small text at the bottom. If you consolidate, you can lose any qualifying IDR time that accrued on your loans before consolidation. So it's a significant downside, and you need to weigh that when you're figuring out what your best option is for your situation. Next slide, please. So weighing your option. As you can see, there are a lot of benefits to both types of removing your loans from default. In both cases, you will be, once your loans are removed via either option, your renewed eligibility for deferment and forbearance. Once your loans are back in good standing, you'll have a choice of repayment plans. You will be eligible for loan forgiveness programs, although important caveat, in many of the forgiveness programs, you are eligible even if your loans are in default. So you can apply for relief even while your loans are in default. If you use either option and you successfully complete them and your loans are back in good standing, you'd be eligible for federal student aid. But there are distinctions about what happens to your credit report, what happens to interest and collection. One thing I neglected to say is that when you consolidate your loan, all of your outstanding debt, your principal and your interest, then becomes the principal of the new consolidation loan. So that is a distinction between the two. And there's, like we've been talking about, there's big distinctions about resetting your qualifying IDR credits and time. It will not be reset. You'll retain your IDR qualifying time if you rehabilitate loans in default, but there's a serious likelihood that you will lose that time if you consolidate your loans to remove them out of default. Okay, as if this wasn't confusing enough, um, one other important caveat to add to the mix is that the big bill changes your options if you take on even one new loan after July 1st, 2026. So if you have any new loan, a consolidation loan or a loan that you're taking on for your own education or a Parent Plus loan that is dispersed after July 1st, 2026, it changes your repayment options both on the new consolidation loan and on any existing direct loans. This is because of the big bill that passed in July of last year. So this is also something to think about. If you apply to consolidate your loans out of default right now, it's more than likely that your consolidation loan would be dispersed before this deadline comes up. But if you wait, or if you're watching a recorded version of this training, it's really important that you're aware of this July 1st deadline. Next slide, please. So those are your options. Now, once you get out of default, what's really important is figuring out how you're not going to redefault. So for that, Sabrina, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Kira, and thank you all for continuing to ask your questions in the Q&A. We're doing our best to go through them. And with that, let's jump into our student loan repayment options. All right, so to kick things off, we start off with the standard plan. So when folks graduate or leave school and enter into repayment, folks are automatically placed into the standard plan, also called the level plan. So that is the default repayment plan. Then we have two other options here. From the standard plan, there are these payoff plans, which are variations of this plan. So there's graduated repayment, extended repayment, and extended graduated repayment. All of those have different qualifications. Some require a balance of at least $30,000. Some of them, like graduated, start off low, but every 2 years increase. The extended extends the repayment term. So all of them have their unique qualities with the goal of paying off the loans. There's no loan forgiveness attached to these repayment plans. Now, if we're looking at income-driven repayment plans, we have ICR, which is income contingent repayment, IBR, which is income-based repayment. There is an older version and a newer version. There is the pay-as-you-earn plan, which not everyone is eligible for, that has a partial financial hardship component. And then there is the SAVE plan, in which folks are enrolled, but at this time, no one can apply for that plan. And we're going to dive deeply into what IDR plans are right now. So, looking into the benefits of income-driven repayment plans, the monthly payments for IDR plans are calculated as a percentage of discretionary income. So, it's going to be based on your income and your family size, not the loan amount. So, if you have a lower income but a higher balance, it will be reflective of that. And as a result of that, the monthly payments may be more affordable than if you're in the standard plan and could help prevent or keep you out of default and delinquency. Again, this is especially helpful for folks with lower incomes, those who are unemployed, or those with decreased incomes. At any point where your income changes, where it lowers, you can recertify to secure a lower monthly payment. So essentially, if you have a $0, if you're not making any income, you could secure a $0 payment as a result of that. It should be a reflection of your income. With IDR plans, every 11 months, you'll need to recertify, which is essentially providing shared updated information with the Department of Education. So you'll let them know if there has been any changes in your income or your family size so that your monthly payments are adjusted as needed for the next 12 months. So if let's say you lose your job and you lock in a $0 payment, you will lock that in for 12 months. So even if you get a job during that time, you will still remain at $0. With IDR plans, there is this loan forgiveness component, and that is made possible after payments are made for a total of 20 or 25 years, and that is depending on the plan, which we'll cover in just a moment here. So if your repayment plan requires you to pay for 20 years, you would need 240 IDR credits. If it is a 25-year timeline, it would be 300 credits. Your credits and your repayment history also do transfer over when you're switching from one IDR plan to another. So if you are in the pay plan and you've been paying for 10 years, but now you want to change into the IBR plan, it will be reflective of the 10 years on IBR as well. All right. And I know there are a lot of acronyms that we're throwing out there. There's IDR, IBR. So, what is the difference between all of this? So, to break it down for you, IDR or income driven repayment is the name of the program, and it's an umbrella term. It's the category in the program. IBR, income-based repayment, is a type of IDR plan. So IBR, pay, which is pay as you earn, ICR, which is income contingent repayment, and the SAVE plan, they are all types of income-driven repayment plans. So I'm going to try and differentiate between the two as I'm speaking here. But if you do hear that IDR, I'm referring to the program. If you hear IBR, I'm referring specifically to the repayment plan. All right, so just quickly covering the different components to each of the plans. If you're looking at the pay as you earn plan or pay, it looks at 10% of your discretionary income over a 20-year repayment term. If you're looking at the newer version of IBR for loans that were issued after July 2014, that is 10% of your discretionary income over a 20-year timeline. If you're looking at the older version of IBR, that's 15% over 25 years. And then there's the ICR plan, income contingent repayment, which is 20% over 25 years. Now, one thing to note is that previously the IBR plan, income-based repayment, used to only be available to some folks because there was a partial financial hardship component. That has since been removed. And so folks are now able to apply for those plans if you previously did not qualify for it. Now, how to identify monthly payments on different plans. There are a few options here, so I'm going to quickly walk through them. The first being the loan simulator. You can find this on studentaid.gov. The downside of the loan simulator is that it's not always up to date and it can provide inaccurate estimated monthly payment amount. So I would, take that with a grain of salt. It's not 100% accurate. Just keep that in mind. However, if you are considering the standard plan for any reason, the calculations there tend to be pretty accurate. Um, and it is a good tool if you don't have time to call your servicer and wait on the phone. If you prefer to call your servicer, you can. Um, there could be long wait times, so keep that in mind. You can ask them specifically, what repayment plans am I eligible for and what are the estimated monthly payments? If you are working towards public service loan forgiveness, also be sure to let them know that so that you can enroll in a plan that maintains eligibility for that program. There's also another tool that we have been recommending folks, which is the EdCap tool. It's another calculator. The only downside there is that it does not confirm eligibility for the plan. So it'll tell you the estimated monthly payment amounts, but won't tell you which ones you actually qualify for. And if you are applying for an income-driven repayment plan, you can do so online at studentaid.gov. We are recommending that folks who've applied before March 2025, if you submitted and are still waiting for a response to an application requesting the lowest monthly payment amount, or you've applied for SAVE and your application is still pending, please consider resubmitting your application because now the application no longer has that lowest monthly payment option available. SAVE you can no longer apply for, and there's a good chance that your application is just lost. It's gone at this point. So I do recommend resubmitting your application if you fall into one of those buckets. If you are looking to apply, you will need to provide information such as permanent and or mailing address, family size information, and if you don't opt into IRS integration, which is essentially a feature that allows the Department of Education and the IRS to connect to figure out what your income is so that they can determine your monthly payment, you will need to update manually your income documentation. So that could be a W-2, a pay stub, a bank account statement, anything like that. And you also will need to determine or select a specific plan because that lowest monthly payment option was removed from the application. When it comes to processing, when you submit an application, you should be placed into a processing forbearance, meaning that you are not being billed at that time. It can take anywhere from days, weeks, to months in many cases, especially because right now there is an processing backlog, excuse me, that a lot of folks are waiting for a really long time on their application to be processed. So please keep that in mind. If you are looking to submit an application, it could take a little bit of time here. And what can you do if you can't afford your payments? Now, if you've checked your income-driven repayment plan eligibility and your options, but you still can't afford the minimum monthly payment, you may want to consider a forbearance or a deferment as a temporary emergency option. Now, a forbearance allows you to temporarily stop making monthly payments or temporarily make smaller payments. Usually, there is no progress towards forgiveness or loan payoff during a forbearance, and interest does accrue during that time. Some folks may choose to pay interest during a forbearance, others do not. If you can't swing it, that's absolutely okay. Then there are deferments, which also allow you to temporarily stop making payments. Interest accrues on some loan types, but not all of them. There are also different types of deferments. So there are specific eligibility requirements and forms that you will need to fill out. So if you're undergoing cancer treatment or rehabilitation training or any of these instances that are listed here, you can apply for a deferment. There's a specific form you'll fill out, and then you'll receive an answer on whether or not you qualify. Now, there are some additional forms of loan forgiveness, cancellation, and discharge, the statutory discharges, as Kira was saying earlier. So let's look at those options as well. Okay, so we'll start off with one of the bigger and more known programs, which is total and permanent disability discharge. This allows for full forgiveness on your federal student loans if you are totally and permanently disabled. So, in order to qualify or apply, you will need documentation from either the Veteran Affairs, Social Security Administration, or sign off from a medical professional. In the past, there was a 3-year income monitoring period for TPD. However, that is no longer the case. And borrowers can qualify if they have a mental or health condition that is expected or has lasted for 5 years and is preventing them from getting substantially gainful employment. In addition to TPD, there's also public service loan forgiveness for folks who are engaged in public service for at least 10 years. Borrower defense to repayment if you've been defrauded or your school engaged in misconduct. There's teacher loan forgiveness, another specific program for teachers. Death discharge, where um, the if you pass away, it's not going to be passed on to your dependents. It's not going to be passed on to a loved one. So it dies, the debt dies with you. There's also closed school discharge if your school closed within a certain point of you being enrolled or graduating. Unpaid refund if you weren't issued that refund. False certification, and Perkins loan forgiveness. So there are a few options here that you may want to explore. If any of these apply to you, you may want to look into these. All right, so I know this was a lot of information, so I'm going to quickly recap what it was that we covered today and then provide a few more slides of information, and then we'll see if there's any final questions or reminders here from Kira. So, quick recap. Forbearances and deferments are two ways to temporarily pause monthly payments when borrowers are struggling to make ends meet. You can apply for those at studentaid.gov. But before you do that, we recommend that you look into an income-driven repayment plan to potentially lower your monthly payments first. Again, if no payments are made, you are considered delinquent after 1 day past due. If you don't make payments for 90 days in which you're delinquent, you are reported to the major credit agencies. After 270 days being past due, the loan is officially considered in default. And after 360 days, generally, your loan is transferred over to a default loan servicer. Again, there are many consequences to default. So loans are sent to collections, which is right now temporarily paused. However, we don't know for how long. The government can use its collection powers like tax refund offset, so seizing those tax refunds. They can garnish your wages or make you ineligible for they can engage in federal benefit offset. This also will make you ineligible for federal mortgages, small business loans, federal student aid, etc. And there are ways to get out of default, which is the silver lining here. So if you do want to get out of default, consider the options that were mentioned today: loan consolidation, loan rehabilitation, potentially a statutory discharge as a way to get out of default. All right, and so what can folks do right now? So we are encouraging folks to know who your student loan servicer is, or your default loan servicer. That's really important for folks to know. If you don't know who they are, you can call default resolution group to get that information. We also recommend that you have access to your account on their website. Also, make sure that you're saving any of the communications or documentation that you've received from your servicer, whether that be default resolution group, the Department of Education, the Treasury Department. Make sure that you're holding on to all of those notices. It's really important to have it. If you need to advocate for yourself, if there's an error, it's good to have on hand. Make sure that you're printing, downloading, screenshotting and saving any information that details how many public service loan forgiveness credits or IDR credits you have, if that's applicable in your case. And for folks who have Parent Plus loans who would like to enroll their loans in an income-driven repayment plan, you will need to consolidate your loans before July 1st, but ideally way before that because it takes some time. So we're recommending that folks can apply to consolidate before April 1st, 2026. And this also applies to anyone who has defaulted student loans. We recommend applying sooner rather than later so that you can get the loan issued before July 1st, 2026, so that you can contain access to existing repayment plans like the income-based repayment plan. Folks who consolidate or have their loans issued after July 1st, 2026, they will have limited repayment options, and we don't want that to happen to anyone who's here today. And also, please be very mindful that there are debt relief scams out there. A scam typically involves offering a loan consolidation or debt forgiveness in exchange for a fee. We've seen things like predatory practices that include these upfront fees, claiming to be the Department of Education and promises of loan forgiveness. We've also seen bait and switch that may include immediate loan forgiveness or deadline approaching, or debt forgiveness in exchange for a fee. It's also really important to note that if you refinance your student loans with a private lender, you will lose access to all federal student loan benefits and programs because the loan is going from a federal loan to a private student loan. So you are losing all of the federal benefits that come with a federal loan. Issues or complaints. We know that there's a lot of complaints out there. And so if you have one, you can use your representative office's constituent services team. Often on their website, you can request assistance with an issue. You can also contact state AG offices, attorney generals, local and state student loan ombudsman if your state has one. You can also use your servicer's website. And you can contact your local legal aid organization to see if you qualify for free help. So you can find your local legal aid or legal services agency at lawhelp.org. And we're also going to send you a link to all of this information as well. So we will be sending this, don't worry. All right, and then keep in mind, Kira mentioned it before, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. There are many changes that are coming due to OBBBA, which will begin on July 1st, 2026. This will impact folks who have defaulted loans and are considering taking action like consolidation to get out of default. So again, the recommendation here is that if you are going to use a loan consolidation to get out of default, please consider consolidating before or by April 1st, 2026. We also do have a workshop tomorrow. It's a general student loan workshop covering the student loan system. So tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern, we will be hosting that, and I can drop that link in the chat in just one moment here. Next slide. All right. I know that was a lot, and it looks like, Kira, we were able to get through most, if not all, of the Q&A, which is really impressive. But I just want to know if there's any last recommendations or thoughts that you want to share with folks before we wrap things up here.
So there is one outstanding question about death discharges. This is one way that federal student loans are very different from other forms of credit. When you die, when the borrower dies, if they owe federal student loans, they are discharged, so they do not become part of the deceased estate. There's information about this on studentaid.gov. And Sabrina, we may be able to share a link about that as well. I will also say, as a quick sum up, I'm so glad that you all were here. Knowledge is power. The more knowledge you have about your student loan options, um, the better off you will be. So I am just so grateful that you all were here. If you take one thing away today, it's that even if you haven't made payments, even if your loans are in default, you still have options. You still have ways of getting your loans back into good standing. And it's really important to make sure that you have a plan for your student loan repayment so that you don't face the government's collection powers in the future. So thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much for having me, Sabrina and Natalia. And I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you so much for being here, Kira, and thank you all also for joining us. We will be doing more of these, so keep an eye out for that and keep an eye out for the recording and more links tomorrow. I hope everyone has a great rest of their day. Take care, and we'll see you soon.